Welcome to NPR, Northampton Poetry Radio, with erstwhile Poet Laureate Rich Michelson. Rich Michelson, you have two very special guests with you and us today. The pleasure of the introduction, the microphone, it's yours.
Thank you, Bill, and hello. Two very special guests indeed. My guests are Rabbi Benjamin Weiner and Jena Schwartz, who will be reading this coming Saturday. Let's put this on your calendars right now. This coming Saturday at the Jewish community of Amherst, which is on Main Street in Amherst, 742 Main Street, at 7 p.m. They will be reading with another Jewish poet by the name of me, Richard Michelson. So we're going to have some fun. This is an evening of poetry at the Jewish community of Amherst. Everyone is welcome. You do not have to be Jewish to come. How's that?
Yeah, a lot of people say you don't have to be Jewish to be Jewish.
Okay. And, it's a tough time. It's a tough time, obviously, for all of us. I think it's a good time for everybody to come and hear Jewish poets and hear what we have to say. This is not going to be a Israeli-Palestinian discussion, which the rabbi led beautifully to the congregation just on Monday night. But this is Jewish poets writing about Jewish history, about what's in their mind. Let's start with the rabbi. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Rich.
So Ben happens to be my rabbi. I am a congregant at the Jewish community Amherst. He is also a James Joyce scholar. Not your typical rabbi in that. He's studied literature, and his sermons are absolutely amazing. In fact, well before this was planned, when Ben started, he is in fact the longest running rabbi that the JC has had. I think we just passed that milestone last week, or somewhere is about there, and I always thought that his sermons were like poetry. So tell me a little bit. When you were studying in school, did you write poetry then?
Not really, Rich. I'm kind of more of an occasional poet. I never really kind of cultivated myself as a poet. It just sort of seems to happen from time to time. And most recently, I think I've gone through a spate of writing a number of poems, largely with encouragement of Jena and another poet you might know, Doug Anderson, who have kind of taken me under their wings and kind of helped me to find a poetic voice. But it's still very sporadic.
All right. Well, you have two great teachers. Doug has been on this show and is a wonderful poet and a dear friend of mine. We share poems every Monday night. We've been doing that for about 25 years now. And
Can I note for Doug Anderson, who became famous, I think, first because of his writing about the Vietnam War,
yes,
which is extraordinary.
Extraordinary. And so let's see. And Jen, you're a teacher, so let's see how well they're doing. Do you have a short poem you want to read now, just to give us a sense of what people are going to hear?
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, I'd be glad to. So firstly, I just want to point out, I don't know if I really am a Jewish poet. My themes don't necessarily, my sermons do, but my poems don't necessarily. So this is a poem I wrote when my son, who's now 11, was getting into the Beatles a great deal, and it's called /McCartney. And it goes like this. After a hard day's night and help, I thought to show him what his 15-year-old dad used to look at in the wee hours on VHS, while wondering if that was what it's like to trip. He still doesn't know. And so I dialed up the Blue Meanies on YouTube, and then the theme song, bathed in a montage of snippets of the film. And in one of them, the Fab Four awash in the sea of time and growing wild white beards in a single mystic bout of aging. And it was then I felt it, an inexorable grief, looking at him with the beady glasses who was never to grow a white beard in life because, a warm gun. And I thought about Paul, alone on the stage of the Rock Hall of Fame almost 30 years ago, still dewy, as they said, and even now, aging almost like a eunuch with his smooth cheeks, despite the beard of Let It Be. When he inducted his friend who was absent, but for the miasma of unshed tears that followed him from one side of the podium to the other, so he had to sway to their opposite to avoid being drenched. and that night of the fame-seeking lead, which I remember as nothing more than a strange mood of grown-ups at the breakfast table, and all of our partners in song, now lost in the void, behind the slash, beyond the sea.
You've been listening to Rabbi Ben Weiner, who will be reading this Saturday night at 7 o'clock at the Jewish community of Amherst. And Ben, yes, you are Jewish. You're a poet. That makes you a Jewish poet. There's no way around that. And
Okay.
also at your synagogue, we actually have a poet laureate. So that's a little unusual. Hello, Jena.
Hello.
So tell me a little bit about how that came about. How did you become the JCA Poet Laureate?
That's a great question. I think it was almost kind of by accident, or just by circumstance, kind of a moment of Rabbi Ben reached out to me during the first summer of COVID. Or maybe late that spring, but in 2020. And it was clear that we weren't going to be able to gather for the high holidays in person. And he was putting a lot of thought into how to have Zoom services. You know, this was not something that we had ever done before or had to even consider. And he invited me to share a bunch of poems with him, to do some writing, and then he wove those poems into the course of the services. And I think that kind of, I'm not sure if the title, is an official thing, poet laureate, and I don't know if it was a chicken and egg thing, if I was the poet laureate and then I read the poems or that happened. And in any case, it's kind of become a standing thing for the last, I guess 4 years now. 2020, 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So it's been a real honor.
And I must say that the services are just beautiful to hear you come in and read your poems during the services. And I'm especially impressed because you seem to be writing, it's almost like you're writing your poems that will fit into the service. It's, like an occasional poet in the formal way. And now you're teaching a class at the JCA with other poets?
Sort of, not exactly, but I led a couple of workshops leading up to the high holidays this year to make space for congregants and other members of the congregation to come and explore their own relationship to the themes of the high holidays. And those poems as well became part of the services. So we've kind of expanded the whole thing over the last few years.
Wonderful. And let's let people hear your voice if we could, if you have something to read now.
Yeah, I'm going to read a poem from a book I published in 2016. And a lot of the poems in this collection I actually wrote during the Center for New Americans 30 Poems in November challenge, where you write a poem a day. And this was in the weeks leading up to and then just after Trump's election. So it was a pretty, as you all know, intense time. The poem's called They Say. They say don't negotiate with terrorists. They say don't take the bait. They say a bully is just a boy swinging his weight around the swing set. They say don't talk with your mouth full. They say it takes two to tango. They say how short. They say he said and she said. They say sign the petition. They say ignorance is bliss. They say every penny counts. They say children don't miss a thing. They say the walls have ears. They say we will take that into account. They say, can we get that in writing? They say save one life and you've saved the whole world. They say it began with the word. They say love wins. And when I hear this, love doesn't play. And what I hear is love doesn't play because love is not a game. They say love is patient, love is kind. And that is when I start paying attention.
That's Jena Schwartz, who will be reading an evening of poetry at the Jewish community of Amherst this Saturday at 7 p.m., 742 Main Street in Amherst. Everyone is welcome. This is an in-person event and also will be available to listen to online assuming we find a tech person who can who can put it out there. Quickly, Jenna, can you give me a sense of the difference between when you're writing a poem versus a prayer? Is there a difference in your mind? Because so many of your poems are prayers.
That's such a good question. I think it's definitely a continuum for me. I'm not sure all of my poems are prayers, but yeah, it's a little bit of a fruit, are all apples or fruits, or not all fruits or apples kind of question. So it's hard to answer. But the poems I've written specifically with the high holidays in mind have definitely been inspired by liturgical aspects of those holidays. But I often do come to poetry writing as a form of prayer, which for me is a way of, in the spirit of Mary Oliver, paying attention.
Well, it will be absolutely wonderful to be reading with you. We've read together in the past. I will be reading from my new book, Sleeping as Fast as I Can. Jena Schwartz, again, is the poet laureate. Officially now, we have just made that official. We're going to make a T-shirt of the Jewish community of Amherst. Rabbi Ben, this is your first out poetry reading. So nervous? Ready?
Well, I just hope people aren't too shocked.
Well, your congregation knows you by now. Nothing will shock us. And I think the rest of the community is welcome and will enjoy your words, as I always do. And hoping everyone can join us. Again, Rabbi Benjamin Weiner, Jena Schwartz. I'm Richard Michelson, reading from my new book, Sleeping as Fast as I Can. Just as a little aside, I have a National Jewish Book Award and was a poet laureate too. So there we go. Come and hear me, come and hear these poets, and we welcome everyone.
And let me make one last comment, if I might. Rich's new collection is amazing. I've read it. Sleeping as Fast as I Can. Really. Congratulations. I can't wait for this Saturday's. Saturday. When is the event at JCA?
It is at the JCA at 7 o'clock, Main Street, Amherst. There'll be a short Havdalah service.
What day?
Before that Saturday, this coming Saturday. So for those who don't know, can you tell us in one sentence, Rabbi, what a Havdalah service is?
Havdalah is a very brief ceremony a very beautiful and brief ceremony we use to end the Sabbath, end the Shabbat. And so since it's Saturday night, we'll do that first, and then we'll go on to the secular revelry poetry reading.
And the key word for everyone who's coming, it's brief. You heard that, okay? Plus, there are refreshments afterwards. And as I like to say, what's not to like? A brief service, refreshments, poetry. Everybody come, join us. Thank you all for being with me today.
This indeed has been NPR, Northampton Poetry Radio, hosted by our erstwhile poet laureate, Rich Michelson. We'll be right back.